Hey guys, we were traveling last week. We got back. We're home. It was amazing, and just wanted to make another video. And I made this video, and this video, to be honest, it kind of hops from a couple different subjects. It's a little slide presentation. There's 26 slides. It's pretty easy to go through. So I'm just going to whip through it. It's to help us give the framework of things to think about and what to talk about in our sessions or in the community or at the retreats. These are really important things to be able to shift your consciousness. So if you have any questions, leave it in the comments or, reach out to me. We'll do our one-on-one session. Let me pull up the window and let's see here. Let's go back to the beginning. The first thing I want to talk about is how the truth will set us free and how that is true. You've probably heard that in church or in Christian theology. This is a quote coming from Jesus, and he says the truth will set you free. But there's two different types of truths that I want to kind of set the foundation with. You've got truth in your lowercase, that's referring to facts and beliefs. And we develop these beliefs and then we live by them as if they're true. So for an example, I need to be really loud to be heard, or I'm not allowed to have my emotions because I need to be the peacekeeper in the family. And those things become really true for us, but it doesn't mean that it's capital T truth. So capital T truth is generally referring to like universal laws. So an example is like everything I have to say is worth being heard. Those who see me also hear me, and regardless of my ability to articulate things. So that's a capital T truth. Whereas like a lower T truth is, I've got to get really big and really loud to be able to be heard. Lower T truths come from conditioned environments that get wired into the subconscious. We don't even know that we have them, and we project life as if they are capital T truths. So when we're raising our consciousness or we're shifting consciousness, we don't shift consciousness. This is a paradox. You don't shift consciousness by talking about higher conscious things. Yes, that's important, but that's not how it shifts. Where you shift consciousness is actually by becoming aware of the programs and the conditioned beliefs that we have that we're unaware of. Consciousness means awareness. So how do I become conscious? I become aware of the thing that I'm not aware of. So it's how the ego is showing up. It's how these programs are running in the conditioned self, which I call the hidden self. You could also call it the ego. We'll talk more about that. I've got some slides and presentations on that, but hopefully that gives you a basic understanding of that. Now, what Jesus said is you will know the truth and the truth will liberate you. What he didn't say is that the truth is going to come and magically liberate you. So there's the thing that you have to do on your part, which is come to know the truth. And that's what the Romans and the Greeks were talking about. It's like the most important thing you could ever do is to come to know thyself. Well, what are you trying to know? You're trying to know the things that you are identified with, the things that you get triggered by, the subconscious beliefs that drive these patterned behaviors. Let's talk about those in detail. There's a gajillion different ways to do that. Yours is different than the next person. So if you have any questions on that, leave it in the comment and we'll go into more details of that. Most importantly, you have to know the truth for the truth to liberate you. Otherwise, the truth isn't going to do anything. Now, the other side of that coin is facts. So the facts are not going to set you free. Think about the last argument that you had, or that cowboy saying, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. Facts don't liberate you. They can support, they can help, but there's a difference between facts and truth. So we're going to try to go through a little bit of how the truth, that lowercase t truth gets planted inside of us. That's the first thing we want to go over. So we'll use the Garden of Eden as an example because I believe that it is the mythic mirror of childhood. So, well, the story of Adam and Eve, according to higher conscious thought, is that you are Adam and you are Eve. That the story of Adam and Eve is not about a story of two different genders, but it's a story about all humans that have both these energies inside of them. So you have an inner masculine. That's what helps you be structured. That's what helps you wake up and get stuff done. And then you have your inner Eve, which is your inner feminine. And these two are, the feminine is like really flowy and nurturing and emotions. And those two need to come together. And so we've got to bring those together within ourselves. And when we were born, they were totally united. And then we went through the Garden of Eden experience, which is the nurturing home life environment that you were raised in. Now, the expulsion from Eden symbolizes we as children lose that perfect trusting state of being at mom and dad's. I mean, how many times have we sat there and we're like, dude, I just wish I could go back to being a little kid again and I could just go play and make mud cakes and ride my bike all day long, and life would be so much simpler and easier, and someone else can pay the bills, right? This is the literal Eden that we were eventually had to leave, right? And so if we break this down into plain English, this is also the place where we start to get these conditioned beliefs about ourselves. So when we were little kids, we were totally dependent on our caregivers or our parent figures. And we have to be dependent on them because we can't feed ourselves, you can't protect yourself. And deep down inside of us, we all want our parents, we all believe that our parents are like perfect, right? And eventually we wake up and we come to learn that that was a bit of a fairy tale. And they call that the magical Eden because we know that no parent is perfect. And if you're a parent, you know that you've made mistakes. So really good parents mess up and we ignore our kids, or we got ignored, we got yelled at, we got neglected, we got abused, we witnessed scary fights between these people that are supposed to be perfect. And the thing you have to understand about when you were a kid, and you can also look at this for your own children, because this will help you be able to parent a little bit better, is that the child's mind cannot handle thinking my parents aren't safe, because the child's survival literally depends on those adults being able to be safe. Because if the parents aren't safe, then how could I ever be safe? So we have to believe that we are safe, and therefore we have to believe that they are perfect. So instead, the child's brain goes to, it must be me. I must be bad. I must be unlovable. That way the child still feels like the parent's okay, because that will feel safer to the child. So like when a child is yelled at, when I was yelled at as a kid, I didn't sit there and think, oh, my mom must be having a really bad day, or she's got all kinds of really, difficult things going on. When I was a child, and I'm talking about younger than 7 years old, from the brain, and I've got another video on this, so it's going to go in a little bit more into the science of it. From 0 to about 7 years old, the human brain is in a theta state. Theta is like hypnosis. So everything that you're experiencing is as if it is capital T truth, because that's what happens when somebody's hypnotized and they're told, by the hypnotist that every time I say the word chicken, you're going to run around the stage and cluck like a chicken. And then, 5 minutes later into the show, he's like talking about how last night's barbecue chicken was amazing. And all of a sudden the guest gets up randomly and starts running around clucking like a chicken. That's because when they were hypnotized, their brain was put into a theta state. And then whatever they were told, they now believe that that is ultimate capital T truth. That's why they do that. That state is what was going on with every single child and every single one of us up until about 7, sometimes they say about 8 years old. The other thing that's really interesting is that the prefrontal cortex, the brain's ability to reason and observe and analyze and look at things from a different perspective, that part of the brain doesn't fully develop for men until early 30s, and for women it's like late 20s. So now when you're trying to reason with your 17-year-old or your 14-year-old and you're like, his brain don't work right. It's not that the brain doesn't work right. It's that his brain works perfectly like a 14-year-old and he's doing 14-year-old things. And you're trying to communicate with him as a 40-year-old, or your parents were trying to communicate with you and they were in their 50s and, you were a young kid. So there's a part of the brain development that takes into account, but then there's also part of the theta state, which has its own influence and impact on the brain. So the child has to think, oh, it's got to be me. So when my mom was yelling at me, my mom, I wasn't sitting there thinking like, oh, she's having a really bad day. Like, of course I was like, well, something must be wrong, but I need my mom to be perfect. So I'm looking through this magical lens called magical thinking, where I'm saying there's nothing wrong with mom because that feels safer to me. And if there's nothing wrong with mom, then there must be something wrong with me. So, I'm the problem here. This creates what they call survival adaptations. These ways of coping, the survival adaptations, they're helping us as children stay connected to the parents. But the price is that the child has to bury their own real feelings and their real needs. So we start to develop ways to cope. And these ways of coping then get conditioned as our program. So think of yourself as like a computer program that is having these survival adaptations installed, and how you're going to play that program out is going to help you stay safe, feel like there's connection, belonging, and we develop different ways to cope depending on our different personality types. So somebody, maybe you might decide that being a people pleaser is how you can like help things out, or maybe you just shut your feelings down, stay hyper alert to avoiding making mistakes. You become the peacemaker, the high achiever, the golden child, the funny child, the rescuer, the invisible child. There's a whole bunch of different archetypes that come out. These are all driven by survival adaptations to get belonging and to avoid abandonment, to get connection. And sometimes when we didn't get that connection, we become really big and loud, and we become really funny because we get attention, because attention feels like connection when we don't know what connection and love actually feels like. So hopefully that makes sense. This then becomes our identity, because while this is happening, that prefrontal cortex still hasn't fully developed. That's where we're going to get a lot of our higher consciousness. Even Carl Jung said we're going to spend the first 40 years of our life developing a really healthy ego. Then we spend the next half of our life trying to become aware of that ego and how it's showing up. So these big shifts in consciousness, they actually it's like a really rare thing if it's happening before 40 years old. So be kind and gentle with yourself if you're younger than 40. So it becomes now here's the problem. Over time, the survival strategies, I'm not allowed to have my needs, or I have to please everyone, whatever that is, everyone has their own, start to feel like your actual identity. And then we grow up believing this is just who I am. And this is where the ego then says, who I think I am because of these conditioned upbringing is what I must protect when that gets threatened. And we'll go into that in a little bit. These old patterns follow us into our adult relationships. So we might pick partners who treat us the same way that our parents did. Also choosing partners who are at the same level of beliefs about self. So we always partner with someone who's at the same level of a wounded sense of self, as well as a secure sense of self. So if you're looking at your partner, now this might express itself differently. So a wounded sense of self, person A might express it with anxious attachment style. Person B, who partners with person A, expresses it as an avoidant. However, it's coming from the same level of wounded sense of self. So we always partner with someone at the same level of wounded, even though we express it very, very differently. So having to be told that we must come to know the truth implies that there's something within us that is avoiding the truth. So then the question obviously for me becomes, well, then why would I ever avoid the truth? Especially, why would I avoid the truth if the truth is going to liberate me? But what if I don't even know what I'm captivated by or what I'm imprisoned by? What if I don't know my beliefs? And there's a lot of study that's out there. Highly recommend reading Dr. Bruce Lipton's Biology of Belief, or you can read a lot of Joe Dispenza's work, who uses Bruce Lipton's research and study, where they used to say that 95% of all of our beliefs and our habits are being ran by the subconscious, and we thought that it was like 95%. New data and research has come out in the last few years. They've actually changed it and said it's 98%. So basically, we're just these little computer programs running these little virus programs that are self-sabotaging or self-protecting, and we don't even know it because we think it's capital T truth, when really it's a perception, it's a culture, or it's something, it was a survival adaptation that came from childhood. So why do we avoid the truth when the truth is going to set us free? When we were small, we depended completely on our caregivers. We talked about that before, but to survive, our minds had to make the sense of their failures, our parents' failures, or our caregivers, in a way that didn't destroy our sense of safety. So this is where the magical thinking comes in. If I'm good enough, they'll love me. If I don't have needs, they'll keep me. If I do everything right, they won't abandon me. So this is where like the golden child comes from, the high achiever, but it's also the rescuer, the peacemaker, the low achiever, right, is self-sabotaging. Self-sabotage is nothing more than self-protection, because I have this false sense of who I think I am, and I need to protect that, because this is a crazy thing. I hope you've heard this before. The nervous system will always choose the familiar hell over the unfamiliar heaven. So we will choose what is familiar to us over what is unfamiliar, even if the unfamiliar is a more heavenly way, a more peaceful way of living. So these are the things that we're awakening to, right? These little shifts in consciousness is figuring that out. And we do that together. It's really hard to do it alone. I would actually argue that you can't do it alone. You have to do it within a community, and a community could be at least one person. So why do we avoid the truth when it'll set us free? These ideas worked in childhood. So because they helped us in our childhood to preserve hope that our parents, that we were going to be okay, our parents are perfect, that hope was essential, even if it was built on the distortions about our own self-worth. So over time, these distortions solidify into our identity, and they start to feel like that capital T truth. So all of a sudden now I have a subconscious belief. Sub meaning conscious, meaning aware, and sub is below. So it's below my awareness. I have a belief I'm not even aware that I believe. I'm not enough. I'm a burden. There's a million of them. The truth is beautiful, but it's also painful. And the painful part is why we avoid it. So when the real truth starts to show up, for example, you have an experience of being unconditionally loved as an adult, that directly contradicts that survival adaptation that you might not have experienced. That new truth is actually terrifying because it contradicts everything you had to believe to survive. So you might have found a really good partner and you're still just like, oh my gosh, I feel so unconditional. And we make them the magical other, right? That it's really about them, when really they're just showing us who we really are. But it's really hard to accept that. Well, likewise, we also have a partner that shows us our false sense of self that we're not aware of. And it can be really hard to accept that my false sense, who I think is my real sense of self, is not my real sense of self. Does that make sense? So if you truly absorb ultimate truth, you have to grieve. This is why we avoid it. And here's a couple things that you would have to grieve. You got to grieve that your parents didn't know how to love you exactly as you needed, that no one was coming to rescue you, that Eden is not some magical utopia, right? That it was just childhood. That your unconscious distorted beliefs have been driving these patterned behaviors of protection that are competing against connection. And if you hadn't have had those distorted beliefs about the self, that you would have shown up differently. Not that you could have, right? Because there is no illogical behavior, right? That's what Dr. James Hollis says. So if you can understand the premise of the behavior, then you can understand why the behavior even exists. So It could have been different. It wasn't different. That's a wrestle that you have to get into, and it creates a lot of excruciating grief. Now, I chose the word excruciating because the etymology of the word excruciating means of the cross. And the cross was a way that the Romans, they punished people and they killed people. And it was like the most gruesome, brutal way of killing someone. And thus came excruciating, right? Meaning of the cross. So that this grief that you have to go through to look at the truth rather than avoid it is, well, it'll feel like you're being crucified. And that's why we avoid that. Because feeling the grief means letting go of the strategies and the illusions that once kept us alive. So those illusions that we created as a child was actually what was our best friend. So we don't want to judge that. We want to thank that and be grateful, but then also say, now that I'm aware of it, I can make some shifts and some adjustments. And when you do that, it feels like part of you is going to be dying, because who will I be without those illusions? And ironically, the illusions are also the same source of suffering and self-sabotage and all those types of things. We often think that if we would just understand something intellectually, so I'm giving you a lot of intellectualism on this. This isn't going to change shit. This is just going to help you realize, oh, this is how the human psyche works, and this is what's going on. So intellectual awareness alone doesn't liberate you either. So now we've just tried to figure out, like, how do we solve this? And what we have to do is go back and see the truth. And this is a lowercase truth, right? But perception is reality. You were wounded, and then you thought you were those wounds, and that separated you from your true self. The parents were perfectly imperfect. We have compassion for mistakes, flaws, our parents' own survival adaptations and their maladaptive behaviors and way of parenting. And that your beliefs about yourself, like I'm worthless, I'm unlovable, I'm worth leaving, I'm abandonable, I'm betrayable, I'm rejectable, I'm invisible, I don't matter. Like there's a ton. That those were just survival adaptations to be able to help you make it through childhood. And that, they were never capital T true. Now, a little anecdote. I don't have this in my presentation, but a little anecdote that's kind of popping up into my mind. There is a way to raise a child in the Garden of Eden so that these wounds don't take place. And anthropologists call that the hunter-gatherer societies. That's where the shared responsibility of being a parent is spread across many adults. And therefore, no child is ever alone. No parent is overburdened with life's responsibilities of paying the utility bills. And we don't live in that hunter-gatherer society. We live in a very fragmented modern society that is filled with conveniences. But if you look down your neighborhood, what you're going to see is a whole bunch of houses with a whole bunch of families inside, and you probably don't know most of your neighbors, and you probably don't know their kids, and you don't know what things that they're really struggling with. And so there's not actual shared responsibility, even though we might have really nice, wonderful neighbors. When we have shared responsibilities, then no parent is overwhelmed. When no parent is overwhelmed, no child is overwhelmed. And you've heard the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a village to raise a child who doesn't grow up with these core wounded beliefs about themselves. That's why you have to have the village. And again, this is not something that we experience in our culture right now, but it is the antidote to everything that we're talking about. If you want like a real antidote to this and to raising kids and all that stuff. So the truth is what causes a person to be born again. Because what are you doing? You're being born again as an adult to see who I really was when I was a child, right? Before I developed these survival adaptations and these distorted beliefs about my sense of self and who I really am. I just have to be reborn again and to see things, how this all plays out. So another really great quote, I've got another one as well from Jesus, is unless you are born again, you cannot see the kingdom of heaven. Well, truly, I tell you that unless you turn and become as little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Do you see what he's saying? You have to go back to seeing yourself as an adult. You've got to go back as a little, like you were as a child, to see yourself like you did back then before those survival adaptations came into place. And then the other thing is he keeps talking about the kingdom of heaven. And then he also said the kingdom of heaven is within you. So there's a lot to take in here. There's a lot of philosophy. There's a lot of neuroscience. There's a lot of relationship science, right? In how we relate with ourselves, the neurobiology that's there. This is a very high level overview. Whatever questions you have, please let me know. And we'll dive into it deeper in the one-on-one sessions. Okay, we'll chat soon.